George Friedman, thank you so much for joining me.
Good to be here.
I would like to discuss what's happening in North Korea. The situation there seems to be escalating in a way that really concerns a lot of people. Many top U.S. policymakers over the last few weeks have made some very concerning remarks about North Korea, and let's roll them right now.
North Korea continues to launch missiles, develop its nuclear weapons program, and engage in threatening rhetoric and behavior. We stand with our peace-loving Republic of Korea ally to maintain stability on the peninsula and in the region. America's commitments to defending our allies and to upholding our extended deterrence guarantees remain ironclad. Any attack on the United States or on our allies will be defeated, and any use of nuclear weapons would be met with a response that would be effective and overwhelming.
The policy of strategic patience has ended. We're exploring a new range of diplomatic, security, and economic measures. All options are on the table.
We're going to abandon the failed policy of strategic patience, but we're going to redouble our efforts to bring diplomatic and economic pressure to bear on North Korea.
So where is this situation heading? Are these policymakers preparing the United States for war with North Korea?
We're at a crucial point, which is having a nuclear program is not a threat to us. Having nuclear weapons is a threat that has to be dealt with. They're approaching the boundary line between having just a nuclear program that they're fooling around with to something that can become a nuclear weapon. Our read on the situation is that the North Koreans really are not interested in having nuclear weapons. It doesn't do anything for them because the first time they use one, everybody's killed, and they're not crazy, even if they want to behave that way.
So you say that they have a nuclear program, but they don't really have a nuclear weapon. So you're saying that once they weaponize that nuke and put it on top of an ICBM, a missile, it becomes a weapon.
Exactly.
Right.
There's a certain point that you cross where it can be delivered very quickly. As they move to that point, we may want to take them out. But what is the point? At what point do we have to act? Because any action we take is very likely going to require at least small nuclear weapons. They have buried their facilities way underground. They have had decades of experience hardening these, and it's not clear that a tactical military strike of normal sort will take them out. So the president and everybody else is saying, are they actually crazy enough to go across the line, which I don't think they are? But they're also saying, can we take a chance? I mean, if they're that close and they suddenly pop up on the other side, it's too late. We need to act now, perhaps. So they've gone to the Chinese. And they're going to the Chinese to get a read on where they are and what their intentions are. Going by intentions is risky because intentions can change. Trusting the Chinese is risky because we think we know what the Chinese are interested in and we may not. So we are all at a place where the North Koreans has pushed us to a point where we have to make a decision. Of course, the North Koreans know we've pushed them to the point. They don't want to be bombed. They don't want to hit Tokyo and then themselves turn into a glass field. Each side is trying to figure out what the other side is capable of and what they intend to do. And we've been issuing warnings. And the Chinese are telling them the Americans are probably serious. Or they're telling them, don't worry, the Americans aren't serious. But we're approaching the witching hour where the President of the United States has to make a decision. And that decision is only the President of the United States.
I had a very prominent Chinese banker tell me just a few days ago that in his opinion, he felt that North Korea was a useful weapon for China.
Yes.
That China uses North Korea. And he said if the Americans had a similar situation, they would probably do the same thing. So I guess the question is this, and you've already addressed it to some extent, but maybe not fully. To what degree is China useful in terms of being able to push the North Koreans to actually do something? What kind of leverage do they really have, if you boil it down?
That really is the question. And the answer to it is that North Korea is useful to China. It's useful to China because only the Chinese, by legend, are able to deal with them. Every time the North Koreans do something dangerous, we go to the Chinese and say we do that, and then the Chinese basically say to us next time we come to talk to them about trade, look, we just saved you on the North Korean issue, why don't you give us a break here? And the Chinese will do that, and they use it. And you'll see that when we get to really hard times in the trade negotiations, North Koreans will behave strangely. So I'm personally convinced that the Chinese and the North Koreans are playing a bad cop, worse cop game with us. But what if I'm wrong? And this is the problem that General Mattis is facing, Tillerson is facing, and especially the President is facing. We all have our theories of what they're doing. And in my theory, they're not going to go to the point of really posing a danger. But the President is responsible for the safety of this country and of our allies. So he's going to have to make a decision, and then General Mattis, Secretary of Defense, is going to say to him, well, it's not going to be as simple as that. It's going to possibly take us to nuclear attack. Now, do we want to be, for the second time in history, the only country in the world? I think that's one of the reasons why Trump has been urging the Japanese to build nuclear weapons. It's been dismissed as crazy talk and stuff like that, but it really isn't. I mean, of all the countries that can do this, one, Japan has the greatest interest after South Korea. Two, it really pulls out the venom then of another attack. And three, the United States doesn't want to be the only country to bear the burden of using nuclear weapons. I think the Japanese are closer to having a nuclear weapon than they claim. I think they could have one, tightening one last screw, and suddenly they'll have one. And what we're really saying to the Japanese in particular is, you're worried about North Korea, we're worried about it, we're both going to bear the burden. It's not going to be just us. So it gets really complicated. One, we're worrying about North Korea's intentions. Two, can we rely on what China is telling us? And then we're simultaneously trying to shift the burden of response to the Japanese. It is an extraordinarily complicated situations. And as in most things, when things get really complicated, that's when things go wrong.
I think we're addressing this issue from maybe worst case scenario, that North Korea, develops a working ICBM, puts a nuclear weapon on it, and ultimately uses it. I think that's what the concern is. Why don't we war game this out a little bit and say, what does the world look like in 5 years if North Korea has an ICBM, but they haven't used one? Do things really change that much if they do? I mean, Pakistan has them, India has them, Israel has them. I mean, to what extent is this really a threat if North Korea has it?
Firstly, one of the major economies of the world is South Korea. Another economy is Japan. Both are under threat. And the problem is, you can never be certain what they're going to do. You can't be certain what Pakistan is going to do, or even the United States. We've not been in a position where we have to use it, and I don't think it's going to be in a position where it would matter if they had it. But the president doesn't have the option of not thinking in terms of the worst case. Because in the worst case, he launches an attack, they're destroyed, and he's condemned in the United Nations. He'll survive. In the worst case, in the other way, Tokyo or Vancouver or some other city is destroyed. So the president, I have a theory, and the president has a reality, and he's going to have to make a decision. So we can't get away from the worst case. Because when you're making a decision on this order, you have to assume the worst. So far, we've been able to avoid that assumption because they appear not to have been that close to having one. In various ways, they signaled that they're very close. Now, how confident are we in our intelligence that we know where they stand? Just to throw one out, how confident are we that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction? Intelligence is not an exact science. And so the president will listen to his intelligence advisors and say, okay, that's your opinion. What am I willing to bet on your opinion? And that's really the problem. And it's interesting that at the same moment that China is facing the United States, summit. This is the moment North Koreans decided to put it all on the table, which gets us back to the theory of what is the relationship between China and North Korea. How does China use North Korea?
Mr. Friedman, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Become a Risk Hedge Insider for free by visiting riskhedge.com. Each week you'll receive vital analysis on today's geopolitical, financial, and social risks. Just visit riskhedge.com today to become a Risk Hedge Insider.